we can't have transition plans without people. The issues of as we move away from fossil fuels are now real.
Yes, welcome along to this episode of the Lloyds Bank Credible Transition Plans in Practice series, which is also being hosted on the Edie Extra podcast and video channel. We've got two great guests here today in the London School of Economics, Nick Robbins, and Lloyds Bank Corporate and Institutional's Chinyelu Oranefo. Nick, we'll start with yourself. It'd be great if you could do a bit of a scene setter for us with this topic of transition plans and the just transition and the work that you do.
Yeah, so the whole question is about making sure that people are at the heart of transition plans. And this is becoming a very urgent and sort of business relevant issue. We're seeing the transition accelerate in this country. We're seeing big issues such as the closure of major steelworks such as Port Talbot, putting jobs at risk, communities at risk, also the oil refinery in Scotland and Grangemouth. So the issues of as we sort of move away from fossil fuels, of the implications of people are now real. So just transition is on the evening news. But also as we move towards becoming a sort of a successful, thriving net zero economy, we really need to think about sort of really bringing forward the opportunities that this transition will bring in terms of workers and communities and consumers and supply chains. So it's a very, very live, real issue. And what we do at the LSE, we've set up a Just Transition Finance Lab, really to provide insight and guidance on how to move from this sort of big, high-level why of just transition into the how for business and finance and for communities.
It's a really live and very relevant topic. Chi, let's bring yourself in here. So talk to us about the work that Lloyds has been doing and uncovered perhaps in this area in their research. And do you feel from your perspective that corporates currently have a good enough grasp of what a just transition means and where the gaps potentially are?
Yes, at Lloyds, we've realised that we need to work with our clients on this. We're lucky that we have a dedicated group of experts that have gone through or are going through credible transition planning with hundreds of our top clients, really to develop the learning around what ESG risk is through this lens, and then eventually that will all be documented and then ultimately shared with the market, because I think it is around what is the how do we do it, and not everyone has the resources really to understand that. So a key thing I think about sustainability generally, but particularly just transition, is that need to learn and share with the market so that everyone can leverage that.
Okay. Interesting. Probably 2 points, collaboration and internal engagement we'll come on to. Nick, from your perspective, I want to ask about the synergies. What synergies kind of need to be explored between corporates attempting to transition to net zero and these overarching aims of a just transition?
So I think it's important to see the just transition as not something separate from getting to net zero. It's very much the sort of delivery mechanism. And I think building on what Chi was saying earlier, I think the just transition has sort of three big themes which relate and have real synergies for delivery of net zero. First is actually about maximizing the opportunities of the transition, and there are many opportunities. I mean, net zero is a big upside story in terms of jobs, gender equality, dealing with inequality, dealing with issues like fuel poverty, and so on. So there are lots of opportunities and business opportunities there. And then there are the risks for people and potentially risks for businesses. And then this theme of engagement comes through very strongly. That again, the transition is not something which is sort of imposed from on high, but the importance of dialogue and engagement is really important to make sure that we hit those two areas. And this theme of synergies is really, really important. Why should businesses be thinking about the just transition? I mean, there is the question of reducing their risks. I think there is the question of it's the smart thing to do in terms of building up capital in the workplace. And I think it also makes businesses more resilient.
Yeah, and I mean, digging into that then, how should credible transition plans address specific aspects of the just transition, like worker rights and displacement, for example, to ensure that these corporate credible transition plans truly account for all aspects of society?
Well, the great thing is we're not starting from a blank sheet of paper. There's been a lot of work on this within the UK. The group, the Transition Plan Task Force, we actually had a special working group looking at how the just transition can be turned from this sort of high-level imperative into practical action. So in each of the sort of 5 areas of what a credible transition plan looks like, it's very clear where these just transition factors come in. So in terms of the ambition of a plan, making clear that actually this includes questions around people, as you say, workers, commitments to worker rights which go in there, implementation, really assessing some of the implications for workers and community, maybe allocating capital towards that, questions around the engagement area, the governance, and obviously metrics. So we have a sort of a schema set out, but I think that's very clear that we don't see the sort of social dimension, worker rights, community engagement, supply chains, and crucially consumers. We don't see that as a separate thing, but integral to the plan.
Yeah, so that kind of holistic approach is taken. Chi, there's a bit of concern, I suppose, in this area around the just transition, that it's often not being taken seriously enough by businesses, and that these issues can get a little bit sidelined in favour of other business priorities. So how then can transition plans help to drive internal engagement on social sustainability, particularly at a kind of board and C-suite level?
Yes, that C-suite piece is very important. And the report that we have done has indicated that, well, it had the result that 83% of executives felt that actually they thought that their companies should be taking a fair and inclusive approach, but weren't really sure how to do that. So that's one perspective. And then the other thing that we identified was that the companies and the investors, also, as Nick has just mentioned, have this sense that they're not sure about what their level of ambition should be. And in fact, I think there's probably also a sense of whether they should be involved in social issues at all. Is that something that should be on their agenda? I think the CTP makes it clear that it absolutely should be. And when you're thinking about harnessing the just transition lens in terms of putting your C-suite, your plan together, what you need to offer to the C-suite, I think, is a full articulation of what those social risks are to your transition. And once you've articulated that, also to offer the solutions as to how you address that. And again, I come back to this sense of engagement, this idea of engagement, and themes around collaboration, which may be something that the company does individually, but also maybe something that a company needs to do collectively with its peers.
Yeah, and the Reporting versus Reality report, which you referenced, has some incredible stats within it that kind of underpin a lot of what we're talking about here. I think based on some of that extensive research that the organisation has done, how do you feel that credible transition plans can create a kind of better understanding of the role of workers and society in driving climate action in a just manner?
CTPs require a sort of a deep and holistic look at your business. You need to understand all of what your stakeholders' issues are and responses may be. And also you need to understand the ecosystem that you sit within and what your relation to that is as you transition. So once you have that understanding, you're going to throw up these tensions that could exist. And then you need to think about how to address them. So it's part of actually just good business planning. That's the way that we would see it. If you want to transition well, you're going to have to think about a just transition.
A question I think both of you actually may have views on this around the benefits of all this. I mean, I'm very aware of the social benefits of this, but from a business perspective, what are those business benefits of effectively aligning transition plans with the just transition?
So I think, again, if we're looking at the just transition and breaking it down into stakeholder groups, perhaps that's the one we're looking at. So in terms of workforce, particularly questions of continuing sort of loyalty of the workforce, as well as the skills base. I think one of the constraints to the delivery of net zero is actually a lack of skills. So I think that's one big area. Communities, again, we're going to see lots of expansion of infrastructure, ensuring that actually we are sharing the value of that development and bringing communities on side. Supply chains, again, we need to have that. on board, and we need to make sure that there is good due diligence in terms of human rights in that, and then particularly consumers, and often they're sort of forgotten in the sort of theme of the just transition. But whether we're thinking about consumers as householders who need to retrofit their homes, or in terms of other products, I think it's important to be thinking about that. So I think in each of these areas, it's both the sort of social license to operate dimension, but also building up, if we want to use that language, the sort of social and human capital, and also a spur to innovation, I think.
Gee, any others you can add to that list of benefits?
I think I'd just reiterate this point around, if you are able to address all of these different factors that Nick has described, it is going to smooth the way in your decarbonisation plan. And let's not forget the opportunities here. So we are talking about risks, and it's very easy to do that, but there are opportunities that can be leveraged that can secure the future of an organisation and its success in a decarbonised economy. So they shouldn't be forgotten as well.
I've got a difficult closing question for you, because I'm going to ask you to pin down to just one particular thing. And Nick, I'll start with yourself. What one thing does a credible transition plan absolutely need to have to ensure that it captures the aims of a just transition?
I think it needs to be very, very clear on the front page of a transition plan exactly how a particular company is going to be delivering positive social benefit for the transition. And then the rest of the plan is going to show how that's good. But I think it needs to be on the front page that we can't have transition plans without people. So I think that's from the CEO, hopefully, of the company, making very clear. And their interpretation, the company's interpretation of this, in line with overall principles and guidance.
Gee.
I think I'd just build on what Nick has said there. From a finance perspective, when I talk to my clients, the piece that really unlocks the just transition for a lot of companies seems to be around a really compelling narrative. So what is that narrative, and who are you speaking to? So as Nick just said, if you're speaking to your consumers, why should they decarbonize, even if that might cost them more money? Are you making it compelling for them? Have you set out a vision for them that makes them want to buy in and come along with you? The same would go for your supply chain as well. So it's important for your scope 3 that your supply chain decarbonizes, but what are you doing to support that? Again, is that something that you do individually, or is it something that can be done within an industry collectively? So ultimately for me, just transition, the foundation of it comes down to communication, really good communication and articulation of what that shared vision is that we all want to get to. And then, as Nick says, you figure out exactly what the steps are and break that down.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, I guess we could talk about this topic for hours, but I am going to have to draw this conversation to a close and this episode to a close. So a huge thank you to Nick and to Chi for their expertise and insights on this alignment between credible transition plans and the just transition. Please do stay tuned for further episodes in this series. And in the meantime, if you'd like to catch up on that full reporting versus reality report, which has been referenced earlier on in this discussion, please either search for Lloyds Bank Credible Transition Plans or go to lloydsbank.com/credible-transition-plans. That's it from us for now. Goodbye.